Welcome to the 2019-2020 Compliance Training. In compliance with federal regulations, this training course and related exam is required for the ERO and every employee or contractor who interacts with taxpayers about our tax refund products. We believe that these requirements are an integral part of ensuring product soundness as well as minimizing risk for us and for you. We'll discuss the following topics: tax refunds and our products, federal laws and regulations, other program rules and requirements, and compliance monitoring. Section 1. Tax refunds and our products. MetaBank is the financial institution for the tax products we'll discuss in this training. Before you discuss our products, you should always present the following information about the IRS refund options first. The IRS provides refunds through direct deposit or mailed check. The refund is normally received in less than 21 days for direct deposit and 21 to 28 days for mailed checks. The government does not charge for this service. The taxpayer will have to pay your tax preparation fees out of pocket. Also, the MetaBank tax-related products and services are optional and not required. It is important the customer is aware that these products are optional. Next, present the federal refund transfer and disclose each of the following important points. The refund is normally received in less than 21 days for direct deposit and 21 to 28 days for mailed checks. By using our product, the taxpayer will not receive their refund faster than a direct deposit from the IRS. This is not a loan. There is a cost to the taxpayer. We will charge a processing fee when the first refund, either federal or state, is received and processed as a tax refund product. If a taxpayer receives a federal refund and a state refund, we will charge an additional processing fee. The taxpayer can choose to pay your fees from the tax refund, or they can pay you out of pocket. If your office provides state refund transfers, provide the following information to taxpayers who will receive a state refund. The state refund transfer can be obtained in conjunction with a federal refund transfer, or it can be a standalone product. By using a state RT, the taxpayer will not receive their refund faster than a direct deposit from the state. This is not a loan. There is a cost to the taxpayer. We charge a processing fee when the first refund, either federal or state, is received and processed as a tax refund product. If a taxpayer receives a federal refund and a state refund, we charge an additional processing fee. For taxpayers choosing both a federal RT and a state RT, your fees will be deducted from the first refund received by us, which may be the state refund. If your office is eligible to participate in the Refund Advance Loan Program and you have opted in, your tax software will inform you of taxpayers who meet the preliminary criteria for a refund advance loan. If the taxpayer then wishes to apply for a refund advance loan, you must allow them to submit an application. You must not promise final approval based on this preliminary criteria. Loan approval is not guaranteed. Final eligibility for the refund advance loan is determined by us after we receive the application and complete our underwriting process. A taxpayer can apply for a refund advance loan without requesting a refund transfer. Important: for any taxpayer who applies for or receives a refund advance loan, you cannot charge the taxpayer a fee for the refund advance loan, and you cannot increase any fee, whether it be tax preparation, electronic filing, or service bureau, above the amount you would have otherwise charged without a refund advance loan to the taxpayer. Any violations of this rule may result in immediate and permanent suspension from our programs. Before taxpayers can apply for a refund advance loan, you must present the following information. Our product is a loan and is not the taxpayer's tax refund. It's available in different amounts, and it's repaid only from tax refunds. If the taxpayer's refunds are not sufficient, the taxpayer is not obligated to make any additional payment. Please reference the program-specific user guide, which contains additional product details, including product offerings, loan tier amounts, individual fees, and costs. The following options are available for refund transfers: checks printed at your location and subject to your participation prepaid card. Section 2. Federal laws and regulations. There are several federal laws and regulations you must abide by when offering our products. We'll discuss each of these in more detail. They include the Bank Secrecy and USA PATRIOT Acts, the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, Fair and Accurate Credit Transaction Act, Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, Federal Trade Commission, Equal Credit Opportunity Act, Truth in Lending Act, and the IRS consent forms and other IRS requirements. Bank Secrecy Act and USA PATRIOT Act. Objectives: explain the purpose of the Bank Secrecy Act and the USA PATRIOT Act. Determine why financial institutions must have a Customer Identification Plan, or CIP, and identify your role in carrying out the requirements of CIP. The Bank Secrecy Act and the USA PATRIOT Act were adopted by Congress to combat money laundering, which is the process whereby money from criminal activities is disguised as coming from legitimate sources, and the funding of terrorism. Every financial institution is required to develop a Customer Identification Plan in order to form a reasonable belief that it knows the true identity of each customer. A taxpayer who uses our services is considered a customer. You must download a copy of MetaBank's BSA, AML, and OFAC compliance program guidelines for electronic return originators. You can access this document in the Customer Center under Forms and Materials. Before you take the compliance test at the end of this training, you'll be required to certify that you've read this document and agree to follow the rules it contains. Because we do not have direct contact with taxpayers, we must rely on you to carry out the requirements of CIP. In order to comply, you'll need to examine an unexpired government-issued photo ID for all taxpayers who choose a tax refund product. This includes spouses on a joint return. And record and retain the data specified in the BSA, AML, and OFAC Compliance Program Guideline for electronic refund originators that you will download. Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, or GLBA. Objectives: explain the purpose of the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, and determine what personally identifiable information is, as well as responsibilities to protect it. For taxpayers, this law addresses the collection, disclosure, and protection of non-public personal information, or NPI, that you obtain about taxpayers and their dependents. NPI is any personally identifiable financial information that you obtain during tax preparation or any related services unless that information is otherwise publicly available. Examples of NPI are a taxpayer's income amount and Social Security number. GLBA requires you to protect NPI from loss, damage, or unauthorized access or use and improper alteration. The following are some of the actions you should take. Use an alarm system in your office if possible. Lock paper records in a secure location that are only available to authorized personnel. Use strong passwords, firewalls, and antivirus software on your computers. Use reliable backup and recovery systems that are properly controlled. Encrypt electronic data where applicable. Dispose of unused customer information in a secure manner, such as shredding paper. And deliver the MetaBank privacy notice at the end of each product's application form. GLBA also requires us to explain our information sharing practices to taxpayers. To do this, we deliver the MetaBank privacy notice at the end of each product's application form. Fair and Accurate Credit Transaction Act, or FACT Act. Objectives: explain the purpose of the Fair and Accurate Credit Transaction Act and list red flag situations that may be warning signs of identity theft and prepare to act. FACT Act includes provisions designed to prevent and mitigate identity theft. Among these is the Red Flags Rule, which requires us to implement a program to detect and respond to the warning signs or red flags of identity theft. Because you have direct contact with taxpayers, you play a critical role in our Red Flags program. Be on the lookout for situations such as these. Documents provided for taxpayers' identification appear to be altered or forged. The photograph or physical description on the identification document is not consistent with the appearance of the person presenting the document. Other information on the identification document is inconsistent with information provided by the person presenting the document. Income or other documents appear altered or forged. For example, does a W-2 have a different format than others that you have seen from the same employer? An unusual pattern is noticed across multiple taxpayers. An individual taxpayer may not stand out, but something that is unexpectedly repeated on several tax returns may indicate a fraud ring. When asked to provide identification documents or explain inconsistencies, the person has a response that just doesn't fit. Is it evasive or contradictory to the facts that you know? Remember to trust your sense. If something just doesn't look right, investigate further. What should you do when you detect a red flag? In some circumstances, you may be able to resolve or correct the suspicious items before processing the tax return. Remember that the goal is to separate honest mistakes or misunderstandings from fraud and identity theft. If there's no simple resolution, don't process the return or refund product application. Contact our Financial Intelligence Unit at 888-782-0850. When you report fraud or unusual activity to us, it must be kept confidential. The taxpayer should not be notified that you have reported the situation. Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, or OCC. Objectives: explain the presentation of the product information to taxpayers, what you must tell them, and how you must do it. Review rules regarding fees charged to taxpayers. This regulation requires that you observe several business practices when discussing tax refund products with taxpayers. Before a taxpayer submits any program application, you must present each taxpayer with all options for tax refunds and a full explanation of all tax refund products. Advise the taxpayer that they're not required to apply for any tax refund product and they will not receive their refund any faster by selecting our product. Present all costs and fees that will be deducted from their tax refund. And give the taxpayer time to review all the program documentation, including the application forms and disclosure statements. Allow the taxpayer to ask questions and then provide answers that are honest and complete. Inform the taxpayer that the lender for the refund advance loan product is MetaBank. The OCC also specifies practices that you are prohibited from using. Don't make any statements that contradict written disclosures or other program materials. Don't try to persuade taxpayers to ignore written disclosures or other program materials. And don't pressure a taxpayer to use any of our services or select a specific tax refund product. You cannot charge higher fees to taxpayers because they received a refund transfer, a refund advance loan, or an earned income credit. Fees charged should be the same as taxpayers who receive a similar level of service but don't have any of these items. This includes all fees: tax preparation, electronic filing, service bureau, etc. The Federal Trade Commission Act, or FTC. Objectives: explain all financial products along with their terms and conditions. Section 5 of the FTC Act prohibits unfair deception acts and practices in the conduct of business, including your tax practice. The prohibited acts include deliberate actions that may deceive or defraud taxpayers, as well as the omission of material information that a taxpayer needs to make an informed decision. A specified requirement is that claims in advertisements must be truthful, can't be deceptive or unfair, and must be evidence-based. In addition to these general FTC standards, the OCC has other advertising rules specific to our products. As a result, we're required to review any marketing materials mentioned or referring to our tax refund products. If you develop any such materials, you must submit them to us prior to your use of those materials. We'll review them and provide a written response. The Equal Credit Opportunity Act, or the ECOA. Objectives: explain the purpose of the Equal Credit Opportunity Act and identify different types of discrimination and prepare to avoid them. This law applies to offices that offer refund advance loans. ECOA prohibits the consideration of the following factors when making a decision to lend or extend credit: race, color, religion, national origin, sex, marital status, age, receipt of public assistance income, and good faith exercise of rights under Consumer Credit Protection Act. You're strictly prohibited from asking questions about these factors or from having any information in your files about these factors, except for items used in tax preparation, meeting CIP requirements, or determining eligibility to execute applicable agreements. If a taxpayer meets the basic eligibility requirements programmed into the tax software, and the software presents the opportunity to apply for a loan, you must allow the taxpayer to apply if they wish. Truth in Lending Act, or TILA. Objectives: identify your responsibilities under the Truth in Lending Act. This law applies to offices that offer refund advance loans. The Truth in Lending Act is intended to promote the informed use of consumer credit by requiring standardized disclosure about its terms and cost. For the loan products, the disclosures required by this law are included in the application form that you provide the taxpayer. To comply with this law, you're required to inform clients about all charges, fees, interest rates, and other details associated with the offer. Provide copies of all disclosures to the customer. These are included in the loan application agreement document. IRS Requirements. Objectives. Define the relevant IRS rules and regulations. Ensure compliance with these requirements in your tax practices. IRS Consent Forms. IRS rules strictly regulate what you're allowed to do with taxpayer data. In order to use our services, the IRS has mandated that you must obtain 2 different consents from each taxpayer. Consent to use. Without a taxpayer's written consent, the IRS does not allow you to use tax data for anything other than preparing and filing tax returns. In order to evaluate whether a taxpayer qualifies for our programs, you have to obtain their consent to use tax data for that purpose. The taxpayer's signature must be obtained before you offer any tax refund product. Since this form is required before you can begin the application process, some tax software will not automatically print with our other forms. If so, you should manually obtain the consent to use from the tax software or our website. Consent to disclose. If a taxpayer decides to apply for one of our products, this written consent gives you the authority to disclose their tax data to us. This form must be signed by the taxpayer before you submit any forms or information to us. The IRS has very strict rules for the format and content of these consent forms. Through our website and/or your tax software, you have access to forms designed to meet those requirements. If you choose not to use the form, you must ensure that your forms meet all IRS standards. You must use forms that are designed for MetaBank's refund transfers. If you use other versions, use disclosure for other products or to other companies, they will not meet our program requirements. In your tax practice, you must comply with all IRS rules and regulations, including those for e-file. IRS rules prohibit using pay stubs to e-file returns prior to the receipt of W-2 forms, unless you're using IRS Form 4852 as a substitute W-2. IRS Publication 1345, Handbook for Authorized IRS e-file providers of individual income tax returns, provides detail on the e-file requirements that you must observe. For your convenience, you can access the publication at the web address identified here. Section 3. Other Program Rules and Requirements. Objectives. Determine any existing requirements that directly affect the offering of tax refund products in your state, and identify other requirements for participation in our tax refund programs. State and local laws. Many states and localities have adopted rules that regulate tax preparers and the offering of tax refund products. Some states currently require that tax preparers register with the state and/or meet certain eligibility requirements. Some states and localities require that you post certain items on the wall of your office, hand out separate written disclosures, or even make specific verbal disclosures to your taxpayers. New York City and Chicago are among the cities with their own disclosure requirements. If your state currently doesn't have these rules, be aware that consumer advocates are attempting to extend these requirements to additional states. Instructions for each state can be found on the Customer Center under Forms and Materials. To aid in your compliance with the law, we have created forms and disclosure posters tailored to various states. Some tax software programs will automatically print the appropriate state or local disclosures. If your tax software does not, from our website, you must download the forms and disclosures applicable to your office and have them available as needed. However, adherence to state and local laws is your responsibility. If you fail to do so, your office may be suspended from our programs. Check disbursements. Objectives. Identify proper handling of checks and check disbursements. Keep your check stock in a secure location. This includes printed checks that taxpayers haven't picked up. When handing out a check to a taxpayer, check their ID and have them sign the check disbursement receipt located in the top third of the check printing page, and retain the receipt for your records. You can't cash or otherwise negotiate, such as depositing into the preparer's bank account, tax refund checks that are payable to another person. Prepaid cards. Objectives. Identify proper handling of prepaid cards and prepaid card disbursements. Ensure that all card stock is properly stored in a secure location. If a taxpayer expresses interest in a disbursement by prepaid card, you must give the taxpayer a copy of the card terms and disclosures supplied by MetaBank. Review this documentation with the taxpayer and make the taxpayer aware of additional costs associated with this disbursement option. Encourage the taxpayer to provide a valid email address so they can receive important servicing messages, such as activation or PIN setup, in addition to other important servicing messages. Document retention. Objectives. Describe proper document retention requirements. Remember that all program documents must be retained by you for a minimum of 5 years. This includes product application or agreements, consent forms, and all required disclosures. This requirement applies to all tax refund products, regardless of whether or not they're approved or funded. You must make any program document available to us upon request. If you're unable to do so, it can result in your suspension or inactivation from our programs, as well as other legal consequences. Other important reminders. If you receive a customer complaint related to our products, you must report it to the appropriate Medibank division by calling 888-782-0850. Make sure that you verify the data on all program forms, including fields that are auto-populated by your tax software. You must ensure that every taxpayer understands and agrees to everything that they sign. For joint returns, both spouses must sign our program forms requiring taxpayer signatures. You are responsible to ensure proper signatures are obtained in your presence. If a taxpayer pays you out of pocket, your fees can't be deducted from their tax refund. And if no refund is received, the taxpayer does not owe our processing fee for refund transfer. In those cases, you will be responsible for collecting your fees directly from the taxpayer. Section 4. Compliance Monitoring. Objectives. Recognize methods by which you will be monitored for compliance with Medibank process and procedures. Government standards require us to monitor electronic refund originators who participate in our programs. We use various methods to ensure compliance with the standards outlined in this training. Standard reviews of your records conducted by correspondence. On-site review of your records, required disclosure postings, and security procedures. Mystery shopping, where undercover personnel are sent to your office for actual preparation of a tax return and application for our products. An ongoing monitoring of your tax return and program activity by our Financial Intelligence Unit. In a review, you may be required to verify the following. Taxpayer documents required by the program have been accurately completed, properly signed, and retained for your files. You have complied with the Customer Identification Program requirements. You have followed all disclosure requirements, including any mandatory postings. Your office has adequate physical security. Taxpayer records, check stock, and card inventory are stored in secured locations that are only available to authorized personnel. And your computers have firewalls and antivirus software, as well as other security requirements. Mystery shopping is conducted in selected tax offices. The mystery shopper is seen as a regular client who will request a loan product. The appointment will be scored based on the criteria designed to test for compliance with GLBA, BSA, USA PATRIOT Act, ECOA, TILA, and other consumer financial laws and regulations outlined in this training. In addition to our efforts, remember that other groups are also monitoring your performance. This includes the Internal Revenue Service, state and local revenue departments, banking regulators, consumer protection officials, and consumer advocates. We, along with the IRS and other government officials, take compliance with the program standards very seriously. As a result, if you fail to follow these guidelines, we may be forced to suspend or close your account with us. You may be required to forfeit your fees or other payments that you have received otherwise, and you may be responsible for damages or other penalties. Download and read the BSA, AML, and OFAC Compliance Program Guideline for Electronic Refund Originators from the Customer Center. Please conclude your training by completing the compliance test. Download the Employee Training Log from the Customer Center. All bank product-related training must be logged on this form. Ensure all employee training records are retained for a minimum of 5 years after the date of the training. This concludes the compliance training. Thank you for completing the 2019-2020 Tax Refund Product Compliance Training.